Okay, before we start talking about making the pillow, I wanted to let you know that I have created a PDF that's in the link below. And on this PDF, it has all the cutting instructions, but it does not have piecing instructions. The second sheet is for those who like to use their printer to print out their applique shapes using the Heat and Bond Light, Feather Light, or the Heat and Bond regular, the light. You can just print this right out and cut out your shapes and stick them to your fabric. But if you aren't going to do fusible, you really don't need to print out this second page. So save yourself some ink, save yourself some paper, and just print out this and you can trace the shape. And later on, I'm going to show you how I make a really stiff, cheap template for doing turned edge applique. So this is a 2-for-1 deal. You're getting a free pattern plus learning how to do turned edge applique, but we're going to do invisible machine applique, and you're not going to be able to see it. People are going to think you've done it by hand. But anyway, these are the fabrics that I've chose for my pillow. You could do it 100% scrappy, pulling from your scrap bins. The red stripes are 2.25 by 16.5. You need 6 of those, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of those. But I didn't have any of that size. I actually had to pull 1 fat quarter out because my scraps were all too small. So those will be my stripes and that'll be my background. And I think I'm going to use that on my stars too. I may pull out another fabric for my stars. We'll have to wait and see. This will be my sashing piece that goes across right here. And the red will be for the back of the pillow, the envelope fold or the envelope closure. And then the white is just going to back my pillow top when I quilt it. But just because I went with the traditional bright red, white, and blues doesn't mean that you have to. There's all kinds of options. For one, you could take this blue sashing strip and make it, a lighter sashing strip. That would look really cute. Or, you could go a little bit darker, but still blue. Whoops, that one just came all undone. That would be cute. You just need to go through your stash and pull what you have, whatever your style is. Here's the traditional blue that goes with the American flag. The options are limitless, but it's not just limitless on this blue. We can get kind of wild and crazy with the other colors too. I wouldn't say wild and crazy. That's maybe not the right words. For those of you who are thinking, well, I don't do that color red, white, and blues. Well, you don't have to. Let's put these off to the side. Let's do some Civil War reproductions. This is a bright, I call them cranberry Civil War reproductions. Those would be the stripes right there. And then you've got your sashing and your stars, and you could choose from one of these to put in the center of your stars. You don't even have to put a center in the middle of the star if you don't want to. And then we've got a darker set of Civil War colors, and this would be your sashing, your stars, and then put this cute little yellow in the middle of the stars. I think that's an adorable idea. And then, some people just don't like red, white, and blue, but they like feeling a little bit patriotic. Maybe you're a girly kind of girl, or you got a little girl, and you thought this would be cute because they kind of look like flowers, right? So we could do a shabby chic kind of colorway. And this would be your sashing, your stars, and then the center of the stars would be your little gingham. That would be so cute for a little girl. Make it into a pillow. She would absolutely love it. I know my granddaughter would. They're crazy about pink. And then I've got one more colorway, and it's pink too, but it's just a little bit darker. It's kind of like a raspberry, a mix between pink and red. That's your stripes, and then that would be your sashing, and you could pull one of those fabrics out to make your stars. And you don't even have to put the circle in the middle. It's would work just fine without the circle in the middle. So there's some ideas for colorways, but I'm going to go iron my fabrics and meet you back here at the cutting table. Okay, I went and got all my fabric cut. I've got my 5 red strips of fabric that are 16.5 by 2 1/4, and I've got 4 white strips of fabric that are cut at 16.5 and by 2.25, 2 1/4. And I've got one large piece of blue here. That's for this right here. And I'm going to be appliquing that on. So that's the 27 inches by 5.5. Now, if you intend to do fusible, there's a different cut that you will need to do on, and that cut is on this sheet that you can download. That's in the description box. Okay, and then I decided, you know, for my envelope backing, I was going to do the gingham, and I decided not to do the gingham after I found this fabric. And this is 2 pieces cut at 16.5 inches by 12.5 inches. And then the white fabric here will go on the back of the pillow top, and it's 18 by 18. So let's head over to the sewing machine and start stitching this up. Okay, I've got my fabric laid off to the side here in the order in which I want to sew them. And all I'm going to do is come over here and flip this one up on top of here and start stitching. Press to the red. And then we'll sew this last red piece on and give it a good press with the iron. Press that one out. Okay, I'm going to toss this up to the ironing table. We're going to go ahead and put a seam in our backs that we're going to be making, or our envelope backs. And you can press this if you want with an iron, but I'm kind of, you know, this is how I do it. I'm gonna finger press it instead of going to the iron. And I'm just doing a 1/4 inch or about a 1/4 inch. It doesn't have to be perfect. I'm gonna fold it over once. You see that? I'm just pressing a 1/4 inch seam, or round about there. And then one more time. But I'm gonna do it as I go. Now, the stitch is about 1/8 of an inch away from this edge over here. I'm just using my 1/4 inch foot and running it right along there, and it works out perfectly. Since it's a little bit bigger than a 1/4 of an inch. Okay, we're going to get the other one and do the same thing. Alrighty, made quick work of that. Hold it up there so you can see that seam. There it is. It's just about an inch or so away from the edge. Alright, so let's go over to the pressing table. Okay, we're over at the ironing table, and I pressed my background fabric nice and flat, pressed them all to the red, and I'm not going to trim that up. We'll trim it up after we get it quilted. I also pressed my backing pieces with the seam that I made, and we're not gonna mess with that either. We're not going to trim it. Okay, to work with real freezer paper that you can get at any grocery store, just about any grocery store. I had a heck of a time getting this one. We're going to cut out or cut off a section about like that. I'm not measuring it out because it's cheap and there's no reason to measure it out. So I need 3 sheets of this. I always use 3 layers of freezer paper, so I'm just going to fold it in half. Or fold it in quarters. Well, my goodness. Tri-fold it. There we go. I got it. Then I'm going to cut on those lines. Or those fold marks. Now with making freezer paper templates, we have to pre-shrink it, because if we don't, if we're using it more than once, it's going to start shrinking with the heat. So I did the same thing with making my quilt labels a couple weeks ago. I'll also link to that below. It's just a simple quilt label where you use freezer paper to turn the edges. So this is basically what we're doing here. But spraying it with water, this is just water, to help shrink it. Now I am not pressing hard. I am running across the top of this so it will shrink it, and you'll probably see some crinkling going on, and you'll probably also see some dirt coming off of my iron onto this. It's starch from doing applique, and I didn't clean my iron. So we're just crinkling it up. All right. Now let's zoom in there so you can see all the crinkles. And you want those. You don't want to iron them out. You want to leave them. And I think I'm going to do it one more time, just to be on the safe side. Okay, now we're going to do the other 2 pieces the same. Okay, now that we've got all 3 of them crinkled and shrunk a little bit, we're going to layer them together. Now I'm going to take this last one and just, whoops, get some of that dirt off there. Give it a light press so it sticks to your ironing board or your ironing surface. Don't worry, it does not leave a residue on your ironing surface or your applique. And you can use these several times without any issues. Or I should say, you can use them several times and they still stick. So just pressing that one down onto the first one, and then we will add the third one. All right, now these are going to be a little bit hot. You can pull them up, just be careful on how hot they are. And as you can see, they're all fused together. So the next thing we're going to do is get our templates that we want to use and cut one out. So I'm going to cut out my little star, but I'm going to rough cut it really, really big. Okay. Now, what we need to do now is to glue this on the non-shiny side. And I should have said before, I was ironing with the shiny side of the paper down. I didn't mention that. But we want the dull side up, shiny side down. And I'm going to take some quilt basting spray. I got this at Walmart. It's cheap. Let's get another sheet of paper, just so we don't get overspray onto anything. I'm just going to spray a little bit of basting spray on the back of this so it will stick to the back of this freezer paper. All right. So I'm going to make sure that I'm getting 3 layers of freezer paper and just stick it on there. Now all we need to do is to cut out our, that was bothering me, cut out our applique shape. Now when I cut out applique, I'm trying to cut that line in half. Yeah, it's almost impossible, but you know, we got to have a goal. We got to shoot for something. So that's what I'm doing. And I find that using a serrated scissors, now you don't have to use serrated scissors. I just like serrated scissors a lot better, that it gives a better cut. So we're cutting right on that line, or trying to, cutting it right down the middle. Okay, now we got that off there. Now I'm going to use this circle template, or this circle in the middle, to make the template for the star. So what I'm going to do is poke a hole in this. Now you have to be very, very careful poking a hole in this. So I'm going to lay it down on the table and just poke it through like that and cut this out. Rough cut it. Like so. So that leaves me that for the star template. And now let's finish cutting on the line for the circle. Okay, there's my circle, ready to go. Now, what you will need is, I suggest you don't do this on your cutting or your ironing board. Make a separate board. This is just a piece of plywood that I've covered with fabric, so I don't run my entire ironing station. So we're going to get our star fabric, which was the dots. And we're going to iron it right in place. Now you want to make sure that there's about a 1/4 inch all the way around your applique. You don't really need a whole 1/4 inch, but it's a good rule of thumb. You can turn over or turn under a little bit less than that. I've done it before. Oh, see, there's my ink coming off. I want, before I turn or iron on this side, I want to make sure I clean that off. Okay, and then we're going to press from this side just a little bit, and that should stick just fine. All right, so now again I'm going to just rough cut like so, and then come in and cut about a 1/4 inch away, maybe a little bit less, you know, it's give or take. It really doesn't matter. As long as you can get it turned under, that's all that matters. Okay, now in these little areas where it's coming in, I'm going to make 3 little snips. One there, but do not cut all the way up to your template. You want to just leave like 1/8 of an inch away from it. I think I'm going to go ahead and do 3 little cuts around these points, just in case they're kind of sharp. Now I made these round, the little star points, just so it would be easier to turn the fabric under. When you get those really sharp points, it can be kind of a bear. So I decided to make it a little bit more folksy, I guess. All right, one more point. So here's what we're going to do. I've got this little container. We're going to put starch in this. This is what I typically use, is Stay Flow starch. It's a concentrate. I pour it in this bottle, put some water in it, and give it a shake. How much? I just pour, guys. If it needs to be stronger, I put more in it. If it needs to be weaker, I put more water in it. So I just take it, pour it in here like this. And then I use a paintbrush to go around the outside of my applique. And that's that. Now we need to start pulling the edges over. I like to pull them up before I get started, just to give them a go, so they're headed in the right direction. It just makes it a little bit easier. And I can see also where I've missed a little spot. I need some starch on there. Okay, I also want to turn my iron down. I usually have it set on wool, and I'm also going to cover this so you can see better, so I can see better. And I've used this several times. You can see there's starch all over it, so don't look at the mess. All right, so we're going to pull that in, and then just bring your iron in and let it set there for a little bit. How long? I don't know. That looks like it's good. So when I get to the points, I just do it a little bit at a time, very carefully. You could use a stiletto here if you want. That's all up to you, or a pin to help pull that over so you don't burn your fingers. But I've been doing this for so long, I don't have a problem. I like breaking the rules. So we're just going to work our way around. Those little star points are the ones where you take your time a little bit, do a little bit more fidgeting and pulling them in. Okay, there we have it, our cute little star. Isn't she adorable? Yep, so we're just going to reach in here and pull this out. You don't have to be gentle, just give her a pull. All right, now I'm going to lay it flat and press it one more time. And there's our cute little star. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and make my circle. So we ironed it down. And since I'm using gingham, I tried to kind of center it on that gingham so it'll have a nice uniform look. And again, just cut a 1/4 inch or so away from it. And with the circles, I don't go around the outside of it either. I don't cut it. I just put my starch on there. Oh, I forgot to show you. Instead of using this way of doing it, I now have this pen. I will link to them below, but it's a water paint pen. And I don't know if you can see it, but there's water coming out of there. That's starch that I've put in there. It opens up here. If I can get it to twist. There we go. And twist it there, open it up, and just squirches some starch down in there. And I find this to be a lot handier. It's a lot quicker. And give it a shake, especially when you're using Stay Flow, because it will separate. So I just squeeze it out so I see it coming out of there and paint it on like so. Then I can put my cap back on and store it right side up so all your starch doesn't come out. So here's how I do circles without doing a running stitch. I am just coming in here and pulling it to where it's smooth along the edge. And it's just a little bit at a time. I move along, pulling that edge in. Now you could use a stiletto here, but I'm just not going to do it. I find them a little harder to use, and I just move my fingers really quick. Now, I did an Applique review a few weeks ago. I'll put it up here somewhere. Appliques make perfect circles a lot easier, but I wanted to show you guys how to do this because not everybody wants to spend a bunch of money on Appliques. So there's our little circle. And I'm just going to reach in there. You don't have to be gentle with this, guys. Just reach in there and pull it out like that, and then give it a press like so, and she's good to go. And a little bit of that black did come off on my gingham, but you know, it can be washed, no big deal. So there we have it. Now for your little circles, you don't even have to do applique if you don't want to. I bought these little red buttons. They were about $2.50. You could sew a little button in the middle. Cute as can be, and a lot easier. You know, if you want to just avoid it altogether, buttons are a good idea. All right, so let's set these aside and let's do our blue piece, our sashing. All right, I had to go find my ruler. What we're going to do is just make a nice straight edge here. That's it. I'm going to throw that away. And then we're going to draw a 1/4 inch seam guide on here, a 1/4 inch. Line it up with that first 1/4 inch line. And there we go. Okay. Let's get rid of this. And we're going to use this to turn the edges on our sashing. All right, so the easiest way to do it is to line that line up with the edge of the fabric. I'll make sure you guys are in frame. We're going to line the line that we've drawn on the edge of the fabric. This is the wrong side of the fabric, shiny side down on the template fabric or template material. We're going to do the same thing over here. Line it up, press it on there, and then turn this over, flip it up. Okay, that's end it and stick. Got to do it long enough. A little bit more heat. That one's stuck. I should have checked it. All right, now it's stuck. Now we can flip it up. And give it a press. Pull it off of there. You're going to get a little bit of fraying, but that's going to be tucked under. Don't you worry about that none. And we'll give it a press without the board or the template. And we'll just do it again. Flip it up. That's a little hot. Oh my goodness. Now, I should have said don't use steam when you're working with freezer paper applique. I know, it sounds kind of silly since how we're putting starch on here and it's going to do a little bit of steaming, but if you give this a burst of steam, it could possibly shrink your paper under there even more. So resist that urge to hit it with a shot of steam. All right. Okay. Let's pull that out of there. All right, we've got our perfectly turned edge. Repeat the same thing on the other side. All right, we're going to take this and fold it in half. I'm just going to crease it and then give it a good press here in a little bit. So at the end, just give it a press down here. Give it a little press. All right, then we're going to do the same with this. A little press. That's so we can line this sashing up perfectly, or as close to perfect as we can get. Nothing's ever perfect. All right, so then just bring this up here, line up your creases like so, and open it up, and it's perfectly centered. Now, I also want to say that should you not like this diagonal view or the diagonal sashing, you could put this in the middle like so. Put your stars that way. You could put it off to the side like a flag and put your stars down that way. There's all different kinds of glue based out there, applique glue based. I use Roxanne's from time to time. I really like it, but I think a more budget friendly method is Elmer School glue. Washable Elmer School glue, you can get it for like $1 and it works just as well. And so I've got a bottle of it that I had for when my grandkids were here and decided to use it up. What the heck, it's $1. So to glue it down, we're just going to put little dots of glue along the edge of the seam that's been folded over. So what I'm going to do is, so I don't get it on my table, is just lift it up, put a few dots, flip it under, and put a little heat on it. Now I'm using still a warm iron. Oh, I actually got that on cotton. I'm going to turn that down to wool so it doesn't burn. And it's attached. See that? So I'll just move up a little bit farther, put some more glue on there. Just little bitty dots. It doesn't take much. We just want enough glue on there to hold it in place while we stitch it down. Now you could pin this if you don't have any glue. You could use applique pins, most definitely. But it works out just as well. I just happen to like glue. Now I think I'm just going to do the rest of it real quick on this side. And there we have it, all nice and glued down. I can pick it up by that. It's stuck. And now all we got to do is put our applique on. And I don't know how well you're going to be able to see this on the camera, is you can see a shadow. You see that? And that's what we're going to fix now, is that shadow. Okay, so what we want to do is make a piece to go inside here with a piece of fabric. So what I'm going to do is take the template that I just used and cut it down just a smidgen. Want to go in there and cut maybe 1/8 or so, or 1/16 off of the outside of this template. It's going to make it a little bit smaller, and then we're going to use this to cut a piece of fabric to go inside each little star. And it shouldn't take very long. As long as it, and you know, this trimming this down doesn't have to be perfect. As long as it reaches to the outside of that star, you can see where the 1/4 inch seam is. And it doesn't have to be perfect. All right, let's throw all this away. Let's Eleanor Burns it and throw it on the floor. That's what I just did. Okay, so it's going to be shiny side down again, so it would be this side. Iron it on there. This is just a piece of white fabric that I had left over from a quilt backing. I'm going to rough cut this just so you guys can get the idea. Okay, so I'm going to cut around the outside of this template. And there, again, it doesn't have to be perfect because it's going to go on the inside of this star. But you want to be as close to the edge of it as you can because you don't want this too big. Then you'll have to go back and, you know, trim it up again. But it's better to be too big than to be too little, correct? You can always trim off more, but you can't put it back on. Okay, there we go. Okay, then we'll pull that off of there and we're going to stick it inside this star. Now this could be a little fidgety because you got to get it past or inside that 1/4 inch seam. If you need to get out some tweezers, do that, but there's only been a couple times it's been with really small applique that I've had to get out the tweezers because this, you know, has starch on it. Your edge has starch on it and it's very forgiving. You can kind of roughhouse this a little bit, get a little bit aggressive without causing any issues. Sometimes getting a hold of it's another story. Tweezers are helping out there. Get up underneath there. Lift it up. Oh, there we go. Okay, now let's turn it over and give it a little press. Perfect. And put these right next to each other so you can see how one of them you can see this one you've got still got shadowing and this one you don't. Okay, before I start putting the stars on, I'm just going to trim up the outside of this from the back side. Any ruler will work. Okay, turn it around and get the other side. Okay, now we can start putting the stars on. And we're really just eyeballing it. There's no right or wrong way to do it. Whether or not they're turned, that's up to you. You can get as wild and crazy as you want. So, let's see. Let's see. Okay, glue. So I think what I'm going to do is glue the stars down first and then glue the circles down. It doesn't take much glue, remember, just a teeny tiny drop. I think I'm going to put like 3 or 4 on the sides and leave it at that. All right, there we go. Now we just need to head over to our sewing machine and stitch it down. Meet you there. Before we get started on stitching down our applique, let's talk a little bit about what you might need. Of course, these are just suggestions. I'm telling you what I use. There's other products out there. But the first thing I'm going to talk about is the needle. These are the needles that I'm using. They are fairly new to me. They're called Microtex, and I'm using a 7010. They're supposed to stitch much nicer. So, so far I've had good luck with them. I've used them for the last 2 projects, and I really like them. So that's what I'll be using there. And the thread I'll be using is called Superior Threads. Whoops, I got it upside down. It's Superior Threads Mono Poly, and I am using the clear. It's a white, and it's really strong, and it's very hair-like. I'll be using that in both the top and the bottom in the bobbin. Now, I'm gonna say that most people do not use it in the bobbin. Let's see if you can see how hair-like that is. It's very fine, and it looks shiny here, but it's so tiny you don't see it on the applique. And the reason why I like Superior Threads is because I've tried several different brands of clear thread, and this is the one that I found holds up best to an iron and to the dryer. It will not melt in the dryer, and I've ironed it on a high setting and it not melt. Now, that being said, before you go ironing your project and melting your thread, test it first, because it suggests medium heat for, I think it was 7 to 10 seconds. Every iron is a little bit different, so you'll want to test it before you go iron it, your project. But it not only comes in the clear, it also comes in a darker color if you choose to do like the Civil War theme. So there's an option, but they're both the same weight, they're just a different color. And each spool of thread, when you buy it, also comes with this handy little thread net that goes over the thread, and you're going to need it because this stuff is so tiny and so fine, it just wants to come right off that spool and cause problems. So I'm going to thread my machine. Oh, I almost forgot. An open toe foot. If you don't have an open toe foot, something similar to an open toe foot that you've got a good vision, you can see in there so you can see your stitches. This is the best option, and open toe works the best. Anyway, let me go thread my machine and I will be right back. All right, I'm coming in with another trick or a tip. The monopoly thread is really, really thin. I have it in my hand right now and you probably can't see it. But so it makes it really hard to thread a needle. And my automatic needle threader does not like the monopoly thread. It will not thread it for anything. So I don't know if you can see it, guys, but there is a thread there. It's really hard to see. That's why this is called Invisible Machine Applique. But what I'm going to do is take this marker, and I've lost my thread. Okay. Oh, nope. I can see it. I just can't get a hold of it. Okay. I'm going to mark it, draw on it with this marker so I can see the tip of it well enough to thread the eye of that needle. Now, my vision's not as good as it used to be, so it's still going to be hard for me to thread it, but at least I will be able to see the thread. Okay. I'll show you. All right, there it is. Do you see that little bitty piece I'm wiggling? That's the end of my thread that I marked with the marker. Now I can see it to mark the eye on my needle. We'll see how well that works. Also, most sewing machines have a little white, these days have, let me zoom in there, have a little white panel back here. You see that? And that's to help you see your needle. So put your presser foot down so you can see that needle to thread it. Okay, the first thing you do after you get your machine threaded and in your bobbin, you want to make sure that you bring your bobbin thread up from the bottom. And to do that, you're going to hold on to your thread tail here, put your needle down, bring your needle up, and then pull on that top thread. and your bottom bobbin thread should be right there, and you can pull it out. And I know you can't see that because this is invisible thread, but you get the idea. You'll be able to see it on your machine. And I always pull those threads underneath my presser foot because they are so hard to see. You want them right there. You don't want them going anywhere. Another thing is you might want to test to see if your fabric's going to pucker. I know my machine, I know my thread, and I know my fabric, and I know this one's not going to pucker, so I'm going to be okay not to stabilize my fabric. But you might need to stabilize yours, so you'll want to check that out on a scrap piece of fabric with some stabilizer. I'm using a teeny tiny blanket stitch, which I will show up here somewhere, what a blanket stitch is on my machine. I'm going to set it at 4.0 wide and 4.0 long. Let's start stitching. The first thing I want to do is to crank this down by hand to the outside of my circle. Whoops. I'm going to go down all the way and then back up. I'm holding on to that thread off to the side. You see that? And it pulled up that bottom thread. You see it? And we're just going to grab a hold of it. It's a long tail. And then pull it underneath my presser foot. Now, since we're doing a blanket stitch, my needle has jumped to the side. So I'm going to hand crank it down to back where it was. I'm going to do what's called a tacking stitch, and on my machine I just push my backwards button and it tacks in place 2 or 3 times, and then we'll jump forward a bit. If you do not have a tacking stitch, you can just do it manually 2 or 3 times, or you can tie them off. It's all up to you. So here's my tacking stitch. All right, now we're good to go. And it's going to do a teeny tiny little stitch. I'm going to turn it. Here we go. Just one little stitch at a time. You're wanting that needle to land in the star fabric. And then you turn it like that. There's my threads out of the way. And then we'll do another 2 or 3 stitches just barely inside that applique fabric. And we'll just keep working our way around until we finish it up. And we'll do each one of the centers of the circles, do the stars, and then do the blue sashing all in the same way. So I'm going to do a little fast forward in here. I stopped to let you know that it's a good idea to leave these tails on here until you reach the point to where you were, because sometimes it's really hard to see where you've been. This is so invisible. So keep those tails on there. Just keep moving them out of your way until you've reached that, come back to that spot and you're ready to cut your other tails off. Okay, when you get to the end, you need to do another tacking stitch. It's 2 to 3 stitches in one spot and then jump forward 1, which I'm going to let my machine do that. Okay, and I'm going to bring my needle up And I am not going to use my automatic cutter because this thread's so finicky. I'm just going to lift my foot up and put it back down. Let me zoom out. So now we're going to cut the top thread. And come in here underneath and cut the bottom thread. Where did it go? It's so hard to find. Okay, we got that bottom thread. So now I need to cut those tail ends that I told you to keep a hold of. I need to cut those off. All right, let's come in and take a look at that. That is an invisible machine applique. And those little holes, now you got to consider you are so close to this. Those little holes are going to basically fade away after you wash them, and all that's going to be pulled out and you're not going to be able to see the holes. It really is amazing how invisible this is. Well, I'm going to finish this up and be back in just a bit. Okay, we got our quilt top done, or our pillow top done, and it's kind of crinkly from moving it around underneath the sewing machine. So what we're going to do is iron it. And I wanted you to see, I hope it's focusing on that I have my setting. Now this is an old iron, an old heavy iron. I've got it set between wool and cotton. And I'm going to iron this, and I don't have to worry about it melting those threads, the monopoly thread. Now I wouldn't hang out there for a long time, but as you can see, everything's still stuck. It didn't melt it. We're good to go. So that's nice and pressed, and we're ready to attach it to a background and some batting. So I'm going to take my square piece of fabric. This is about 18 by 18, and I'm going to use just a little bit of this June Taylor quilt basting spray. So I'm going to use it sparingly because it seems to be a little bit stickier than some name brands. Now you could also pin baste this if you wanted to. I just prefer the spray basting. And I've got a piece of scrap batting. This is really thin polyester left over from another project. I'm going to layer it on top and just give it a good pressing with my hands to smooth it out. Like so. And then I'm going to spray the back of my pillow top. Now I suggest that you put down paper or a newspaper or some old fabric, an old sheet over your ironing surface. I'm just taking a chance here. And then we'll turn it over and make sure that, you know, you're going to get fabric all the way around. It doesn't have to be perfect. And now we can take this over to the sewing machine and quilt the layers. You could also pin it. Some people pin and baste, but I'm not going to. So let's go over to the sewing machine and get it quilted. All right, before we start stitching, I wanted to talk about the stitch and thread I'll be using. First off, the thread I'm going to be using is the Micro Quilter 702. I use this exclusively when I'm quilting my quilts or anything. I don't use any other color. It's this one, but you can use anything that you want. I'll also be attaching a walking foot to my machine and quilting it with that. It just helps pull all the layers through more evenly. And then the stitch I will be using is this wavy stitch right here, and I'm going to pull it out as long as possible. Adjust the settings on my machine so I've got a nice long wavy stitch. And I'll be doing that stitch in all of the stripes. And I may do it along both sides of this blue, or I may just stitch in the ditch. I'll make that decision as I go once I see how it looks. So let's get over to the sewing machine and get sewing. Okay, something else I like to do before I get started with quilting is to test out my stitches. So I'm going to turn it over here so you can see it on the back where I've done several different stitch widths or lengths, and to test out my tension. And I think I'm going to go with this one that's on the farthest, this one over here, this last stitch line. I also like to start in the middle of a project when I start quilting and work my way out. With this one, I think I'm just going to start in the stripes. And I'm just eyeballing it if it's down the center. I'm not going to be real picky about it. I'll pull that thread to the top, which you really don't have to do because all this is going to be hidden inside the pillow. It's just habit for me to pull it to the top. I'm going to have it take a tacking stitch, which is 2 stitches. We talked about that earlier, 2 or 3 stitches in one place, and then it jumps forward. And just lightly assist it down the middle. And I've got an automatic cutter, so I'm going to cut the thread. Okay, I've changed out, or I've pinned each corner down. So if you can see that, pinned each corner down, and I'm going to do a stay stitch all the way around the outside of this before trimming it down. And I'm going to do it about 1/8 of an inch away from the edge of the pillow. Now the reason why I didn't do this earlier was because I was afraid it would shift and pucker. I always do this last, but you know, if you have better luck stitching it down first, then you go right ahead. Okay, before we trim it up, I just wanted to let you see what it looks like from the background and how I did not stitch inside the blue at all and around the edge. I got a couple little kind of puckers, but we're not going to worry about that because it's all going to be hidden inside and by the binding. So let's go over to the cutting table and get this trimmed up. Okay, there's several different ways you could choose to trim up this top. Now it should measure around 16 inches, 16.5 inches. Let's see here. Mine is measuring at 16.25 shrinkage, it looks like. And about the same this direction. So you could measure out the lines on your table by just looking here. You've got a line there and a line here, and then counting over 16 and trimming it, or whatever you want to do. But I prefer to use a big ruler of some sort, like your 12.5 inch ruler would work. You just put it in the corner, trim here, trim there, move it over to here, trim here and trim here, and just keep working your way around until you've got all the edges trimmed. But the way I do it is with this large diagonal set triangle ruler. I can put it in the corner, line it up in both directions, and trim it. Now this ruler is, it's called the diagonal set triangle ruler for 5 to 16 inch blocks. Who's it made by? From Marty Michelle. I've had this thing for years. It's an awesome ruler. I use it for trimming up my quilts also after I get them quilted. And we'll just trim that away. And then I'm going to turn this and do it again. Okay. Now what I've done, because it was a little bit off, whoops. As you can, well, fiddlesticks. As you can see, I've got this little white section right here showing, but that's okay. It's going to be covered up by my binding. It was a little bit off, but it'll be just fine. So now we need to get our backing pieces. We're going to turn this over and lay these on here like so. Now these are going to be a little bit big because my pillow top came out a little short just from quilting it. Okay, I'm gonna layer these over the top. Now I could bring these in, which I think I'm going to do. Pull it over. I've got it lined up with this edge here, but it's hanging over a little bit on the top and the bottom. And I'm going to do the same thing here. So it's lined up on the far edge, but it's hanging over on the top and the bottom. And what I'm going to do is to pin it along the edge so that stays in place. And you could use those little binding clip thingies. I just don't have them handy. I had my pin cushion handy. Now let's turn it over and see how much is sticking out. And see it's sticking out just a little bit, and some down here. There's some sticking out down here. And I'm not going to worry about that. What I'm going to do is go in again and stay stitch all the way around the outside, just like we did before. And then we'll trim off any excess that's hanging over. Okay, we've done another stay stitch around the backing and the top, and we're just going to trim it up like we did before with whatever ruler you choose to use. Okay, now let's go over to the sewing machine and put the binding on. Okay, we've got our 2 strips of binding that are 2 1/4 by width of fabric, which is usually 42 inches. And we need to sew those 2 together. So there's one piece, and then we've got our second piece here. So what we're going to do is just take this second piece and turn it over and lay it on top of the other piece. And then we're just going to take it and turn it this way, like this. Okay? Now let's talk about our foot. I have my open toe foot on. I have put my open toe foot on my sewing machine, and I've got my needle to where it is in the middle. And we are going to stitch from corner to corner. Now, if you're not comfortable doing it this way, you can by all means draw a line here at a 45-degree angle, or you can use a line on the bed of your sewing machine that like this. But this is just a piece of painter's tape that I've put a line on it. Now I want to put a little, my machine likes to eat fabric. So I'm going to put this little piece of fabric on here and stitch. I also like to lower my stitch length to about 1.8 whenever I'm doing binding, because sometimes we can put a lot of tension on these. Okay. And you can see that I've got it kind of overhanging a little bit here and overhanging a little bit up there. And I'm going to take and put that corner right where those two pieces of fabric meet, where it makes that little V. I'm going to put my fabric or my needle right in there, and then I'm going to look down here and line that V up with the middle line on the tape, or you could just draw a 45-degree angle. But now I'm just going to stitch. Now I'm going to watch right here and keep that V on that line. I'm not going to pay attention to what's going on up there, so just go real slow and let it pull it through and keep that V on the middle line. I got a little off, and that's okay. You'll never know that. All right, then we'll cut that thread. Okay, so now we just want to trim this up a 1/4 inch away from the line that we sewn. Doesn't have to be perfect. And I also like to press these seams open. And if you want to press to the side, you're more than welcome to do that. I like it this way. All right, so there we've got our binding. Now we need to get our top. Okay, so we've got our pillow here all trimmed, and we're going to start putting our binding on there. And I just want to show you how far up I put it, but I won't start sewing to about 4 inches away from the corner. Okay, before we start stitching, I want to say it doesn't matter how wide your seam allowance is when you stitch on your binding, as long as it's consistent all the way around. But we need to find how wide it is for the corners, and this is what I do. I always take a piece of paper and make a hole in it. Just drop that needle down, bring that needle back up, and we've got a hole. So we're going to see that hole there in the corner. All right, we're going to take a pair of scissors and just cut right where that hole's at, and that's our seam guide. And on every corner, you're going to take the piece of paper that you just cut as your seam guide and put it on the corner like that, and then draw a line right above it. And you can see where I've already done that right there. Do that on every corner, and when you stitch down, you're going to stop at that line. And then start stitching down the side. Okay, when I get close, I kind of pull it back to look where my line's at. You could even stick a little pin in here if you like, so you know exactly where to stop. And I'm right at that pin, so I'm going to take it out, and I'm going to back stitch about 2 or 3 stitches, and then cut it. Okay, once we've sewn it and trimmed it, we're going to fold it back this way till it's even with the bottom of the pillow here, this way, and then we're going to fold it back over itself this way and line that binding up with the edge of the pillow. You want this to be aligned with the side of here. I'm going to push that over just a little bit. It's a little bit off. Okay, and stick a pin in it. And you want to make sure you go through the folded part over here too. And then we're going to turn it around and just repeat the process at every corner. I like to start a little bit in, back stitch till I go off the edge of the fabric, and then start stitching forward. And don't run over that pin. Okay, after you round that last corner and you're starting to stitch down the last edge, you just want to stitch up like 3 inches or so, 3 to 4 inches. Leave yourself enough gap between the two ends of the binding that you can stitch them together. So I back stitch and then I'm going to cut it. So we've got a good little gap here. Now we got to sew these two ends together. Okay, to finish off the ends of this binding, what we're going to do is pull this one back just a little bit. I think I'm going to actually rip this back just a little bit so I've got more room to work. I started it too far up. I told you guys 3 to 4 inches and I started about 6 or 7. Okay, so I've pulled that back. And we've got this end here. And what I want to do is let's just snip off about an inch, inch and a half like this. And lay that down there. Okay? Nice and straight. Then we're going to take this piece. Okay, you're going to want to bring this one over here. Just a little smidgen. And we're going to lay this one on top so we can see that bottom piece. All right, right there. Let me give this a little finger pressing. Okay, we've got that laying down there nice and smooth and it's overlapped. And we're going to take this piece that we've snipped off and lay it right on top where it's lined up with that bottom piece. Okay, then we're going to come over here. Make sure you're cutting the top piece and make sure you're cutting it on the correct side. We're going to pick it up like this. This serves as your measuring. It's your measuring tool, this little piece that we cut off. And we are just going to cut right at the very end, straight up. Okay, and this part gets tossed away. We're done with that. And this little scrap gets tossed away. Now what we do, now I always do this because it just makes more sense to me in my brain, but I will take this and fold it down at a 45-degree angle and just give it a little press. You know, if you have to, bend this up there so it'll lay flat. And I'm going to press that, and that's going to be our stitching line. Okay, so now we can take this one and lay it on top, match that bottom corner to this corner, and we're going to pin it. Oops. Okay. I'm going to pin it. We probably have to fold part of it up a little bit. Pin this other corner. All right, now all we've got to do is unfold this and stitch on that crease line that we made. Now, if you don't trust yourself and what just happened, you can actually pin on that line, that crease line that you made, like this. Just stick some pins down that line. I got a bent pin like that. And open it up and see if it doesn't lay flat, and it's gonna lay flat, but my pins are in there. We've done it the right way. Put it down in there and just sew from corner to corner on that line that you creased with your finger. Take those pins out. Cut that thread. Now before you cut these tails off, do this. Open it up and make sure that you've got it going the right way, and it is. So now we're going to cut these tails off that we just made. About 1/4 inch. You can press it open is how I like to do it, or press it to the side. That's totally up to you, but I like the less bulk, so I press it open. And as you can see, my seam got really kind of small, but that's okay. As long as we caught it, that's all that matters. And then we'll just press it. Press our crease down and pin it into place. And I pin it into place because I've got a biased cut here. So it's kind of wonky and it will stretch. So I'm going to pin it in place in a couple places and then finish sewing it down. Okay, I've got to readjust my seam again. Make sure that I've got it in the right place. That looks about right. Yep. I'm going to back stitch and then stitch it on down. Okay, we've got our binding done on the back. Now we just need to open it up, press these out, push the corners out, and just do that all the way around. Now I like to start stitching like in the middle of one of the sides. And you just pull that to the front so it's covering up any stitching that you've done, your stay stitches. Just cover it up and start stitching it down. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move my needle to where it's at the edge of that binding. I don't think that's right. Okay. I'm going to back stitch it in place just nice and secure. Okay, before we get to that corner, I want to fold the bottom up first and then the one off to the side. What I like to do is just put a little pin there. I can cut those threads off later. I'm using that pin to push that corner in. And then I can grab it and bring it on over. Whoop, that one didn't get quite like I wanted it. Bring it on over. And we're going to stitch right up to that corner. Right where those two. Okay, I wanted to zoom in and let you guys see what's going on here. I have folded that over and I'm going to stitch to about right there where my pin's at. Just kind of slow down. Okay, I've landed right in that corner and then we're going to turn it. and get rid of this thread that's driving me crazy. There we go. Okay, I'm just going to keep my pen right out here off to the side so I have it. And we'll continue stitching. Down to the next corner. Do each corner the same way. All right, to put that pillow form in there, it's just a matter of stuffing. You can use whatever size pillow form you want. I tend to use a size bigger than what I actually need because I like really heavily stuffed pillows. And you'll want to, stuff those points up into those points, work them a little bit, work them in there, and then turn it around and stuff from the other side. Do the thing, same thing, work those points up into the corners, kind of smooth it out. Give it a good punching. Oh yeah, that's nice, 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 nice. There you have it, a nice patriotic pillow that will have a nice swoop to it when you set it on your couch. If you're looking for a patriotic quilt to go with your patriotic pillow, I have both of these for sale in my Etsy shop. This one's called Stars and Stripes Forever, and this one's called Patriotic Picnic. Both of them are done with applique. If you would like more applique tutorials, I'll put a link up here or somewhere to another video I have for raw edge applique. But thanks for stopping by my little spot in Podunk. Please like, share, and subscribe. Click that little bell notification so you never miss one of my videos. See ya!